Hi everyone, welcome back to Feather Stitch House. My name's Rebecca and each week on this channel I upload videos about embroidery and textile art to help you get creative. Each year on Sundays we create a project called Winging It, and these are improvised textile art pieces that I create on camera to help take some of the fear away from experimenting with your fabrics and threads. This year we're creating a fabric journal, and each month, week by week, we're building a panel that captures something about what's happening in our lives or in the world around us as we move through 2024. We've done quite a lot of variety of things so far, and this month we're doing something very different and taking inspiration from the night sky. Now, that's not something I've done before. I think this one is going to be a really straightforward, slow stitch piece. It's going to be quite experimental, just playing around with stitches and fabrics, and hopefully we'll get quite a meditative piece of work as we move through the month. Knowing me though, it will probably get really fussy and lively at some point, so bear with me. I'm going to try my best to keep this one super simple. You'll need some light fabric and some dark fabric, some scissors, needle and threads, and I think that's pretty much it. Oh, you'll need a foundation piece of fabric and some batting or felt just to give a little bit of padding to your work. And I think that is pretty much it. So if you want to stitch along, grab all your bits and pieces and let's get stitching. Okay, so here we go again with our June panel. You can see I've set it up, so I've got my wadding. This is left over from last year's quilt. If you don't have wadding, you could use some just felt, or normal craft felt will be fine, or a bit of an old towel or an old blanket or whatever. And I've got a bit of recycled sheet. This was a sheet that had got a hole in the middle of it, fitted sheet, so I couldn't cut it and piece it back together, and I'm just using the bits of it that are still robust as my backing piece. And I've marked out the size of my panel, so that is 16 centimeters wide and 24 centimeters deep, and I've left around about 4 centimeters all the way around just to cope with any movement or shrinkage as I add stitches. So this month I have been really inspired by a lunar or an astronomical event that happened at the beginning of the month, and on its own it wouldn't have been enough, but obviously June is also the month of the longest day, the summer solstice, so that happens on the 20th of June. And on the 3rd of June, early in the morning, so about an hour before sunrise, it was possible to see 6 planets in the sky at the same time, forming a straight line. And this happens more regularly than you would think. It's called a planet parade, and 2 of the planets were difficult to see with the naked eye. You needed binoculars or a telescope, but I just thought it was so special and such an event, and actually a distraction from everything else that's happening in the world, and particularly in the UK. If you didn't know, our Prime Minister Rishi Sunak called a general election totally out of the blue, and so that's going to happen on the 4th of July, which I know if you're watching in the United States, then that's a very different event for you. But I thought we could go all political, but who wants that? Thought we could have our videos this month as a little oasis of calm away from all the chaos. So we're going to look up and we're going to focus on the night sky. So we're going to create a piece that is reflective of the summer solstice, the longest day, and the planet parade. So this is going to be almost entirely slow stitch. It's going to be quite abstract and still loaded with meaning. We'll know what it means even if it's not obvious from the piece. So I started out with a bit of maths, which I won't bore you with, but I've worked out how much of my panel needs to be light to represent the day and how much needs to be dark to represent the night. And it's 68% for where I live. So I live in Lincolnshire in the UK, and at our latitude we have a 68-32 split of daylight and nighttime on the summer solstice. So quite laboriously, I worked out the area of my panel, and I've worked out that if I cut a piece that is 16.3 centimetres long and 16 centimetres wide, that is 68% of my panel. There's absolutely no need to go to these lengths. I wish I hadn't. And I've got this dark blue here that is 7.7 centimetres deep and 16 centimetres wide, and that is a 68-32 split, almost precisely. I think it's like 0.1 of a centimetre square out, so that will do for me. Now if you want to work it out mathematically, feel free. There is a website that will tell you the sunrise and sunset time and the daylight hours on June the 20th if you live in the Northern Hemisphere. If you're in the Southern Hemisphere, and I know a lot of you are watching from Australia, New Zealand, South Africa even, you will need to flip it, obviously. So you'll have mostly dark and a little bit of light. And I will link, I think it's called Time and Date. It's tracks weather from weather stations all over the world, and you can go on, type in your nearest city, and it will give you all the data, and I will put a link to that in the description below. So that's how we're going to start, and I thought we could just do a band, but I kind of want to mix it up a little bit. So let's do a bit of an experiment. I'm just going to move my backing fabric out of the way and bring in my cutting mat. I reckon that if I lay one piece over the other and cut sections out of both at the same time, I can swap out the shape from one and swap in the shape from the other. So I can do a swap. It's a little bit how you do crazy patchwork. And if I move the piece around, it'll work even better. Let's just give it a whirl and see what happens. So I'm just going to come onto my dark piece a little way. I've got it kind of lined up. Let's come in a bit further. I've never done this before. What's the worst that can happen? I can just cut another piece of fabric and then we can do it again. There we go. So I've cut there, and now I'm going to, I don't want it all to be squares, but I do want it to be angles. So I'm going to cut across like that. So now we've got two pieces that are exactly the same. So when I can turn that around like that, look. And I can put my yellow into the blue and my blue into the yellow. Ta-da! I could leave it just like that. I quite like it. I do want straight lines, and we're not going to go overboard with this. But let's have a thin, long strip. Maybe 1.5 centimetres. So a quilting ruler comes in really handy here because we can see through. There we go. That was tricky because I'm not in the I'm not at the edge of the fabric, so I'm kind of guessing with my rotary cutter. And now I can take this down like that. And I can put my strip of yellow in here and my strip of blue in there, like that. It's fun. Right, let's do one more. Pop that up there. Get these out of the way, look. We can come back and get them shortly. I'm just going to rotate. I need a rotating cutting mat. That's what I need in my life. It'll make life so much easier. Okay. Now, obviously, the more cuts you make, the less robust the fabric's going to be, because you're just giving it lots of places to twist and change shape. So let's go 1 centimetre in from the edge, like that, and we can just cut out a chunk here, and I think that will do. I'm far enough across? No, I haven't. There we go. Right, I think that will do. So let's get all those pieces out of the way. Then I can bring back in my panel, and now we can lay them on, and hopefully I haven't messed it up so much that I don't know what's going on anymore. Right, so that was there like that. And I'm going to get my applique pins and just hold it in place. So I ummed and ahed about what fabric to use and decided that I wanted it to represent light and dark, and I thought about light blue and dark blue, but I know what's coming next. So I wanted a different colour than blue. So I've kind of planned out this piece. I want a different colour than blue for my light colour, and I thought let's go with a colour that's representative of sunshine, because it's sort of sunshine and shadow. But I didn't want to do kind of sun and moon, because then you've got to have sort of yellow and white doesn't reflect darkness. So I went backwards and forwards between what fabrics I was going to use and decided we'd go with yellow and a sort of dark blue. And this looks like denim. It isn't denim. It's a upholstery cotton that's printed to look like denim. It's actually got a print on it, so this isn't woven. It's printed to make it appear like something it isn't. Sneaky. So, hope you're all well, and I have been blown away by the response to the meadow last week. Absolutely blown away. It's been that video has gone absolutely wild, and so many amazing comments. I'm so glad that it spoke to you, and that there seems to be so many of you that found that piece really therapeutic, really cathartic, and it was an opportunity to focus on really significant things that are happening in your life. And I don't want to get all ranty about women's rights, but I think we often put ourselves at the bottom of the list, don't we? We're always focusing on making sure everybody else is okay, and we forget to check that we're okay. And so it's just been so heartwarming to hear your stories about how that piece spoke to you. It means the world to me. So I'm just making art and putting it out there in the world, and I'm so delighted that so many of you think it matters. It makes my day, honestly. I can't tell you how much joy I get from reading your comments. So thank you so much for sharing that with me. Getting quite a little community going. So if you haven't read those comments, you should go back and have a look through it and maybe comment on some of the other people's comments, and just sort of give each other a virtual hug via the comments. It really matters. Got to look out for each other. So this one, hopefully, is just going to be playful. Now, do I mind that they're two bars coming in from the same side? Do I need to turn that piece upside down? Then I've got those two shapes. I think it's okay. It just brings some movement to the piece rather than having two flat blocks. And I'm not worried about seams. It's going to be fine. So I'm not worried about these raw edges. It will all be okay. Now, how is that piece too small now? I don't know. So don't worry if you are worried if you've got a fabric that is really prone to fraying. I mean, I think my dark blue is prone to fraying, but I'm just going to choose not to worry about it. It's going to be part of the piece. There we go. I think that one just twisted ever so slightly. I'm just going to choose not to worry about it. But if you have got fabric that, like if you're using a tweed or something, or a woven woolen, they are going to fray a lot. And so you can just use a bit of underweb if you want to, or you could use some fray stop around the edge, or spray on fabric glue, like quilting spray. That would work, and I quite like that. It's quite funky looking, and I can decide which way up I want it. Anyway, let's leave it there for a minute. I've got a greyish beige here, which I know doesn't match anything on the piece, but actually colours like this are excellent neutrals. Now you can make a choice about whether you want your stitches, your tacking stitches, to be visible and part of the piece, or whether you want them to be neutral and sort of fade away, and that's up to you. So if you want them to be visible, you want a contrasting colour. If you don't, you want a neutral. And I'm just going to do normal tacking, but if another way of hiding your tacking stitches is to do an invisible base or an invisible tacking stitch, so I will just show you how to do it. I'm going to start up here. I'm going to come up at the edge, and I'm going to go down almost where my thread came up. Not quite. I want to just catch a few fibres of that blue fabric, and then I'm going to slide along about a centimetre on the back and do the same again. So I'll put the length of the stitch on the back of the fabric rather than the front, and the stitches on the front are absolutely tiny, almost invisible. We used this technique when we did our portrait and we were putting together the light and shade pieces, the foundations of the face. And so you can see, you can't see, that's the point. Those stitches are invisible, but that fabric is attached. It is attached now. So you can do it like that if you want to. I'm just going to do a halfway house, so I'm not going to worry about making the stitches totally invisible, but I don't want them to be really obvious either. I'm going to just stay away from the edges a little bit, just to make sure that my fabric doesn't fray and expose the stitches. So you can, if you want to, go around each piece individually, or you can stitch right the way across and then work your way back, weaving round. I think I'm just going to stitch it piece by piece. That's going to be easier for me. If you follow me on Instagram, you will have noticed, you probably have noticed through these videos as well, that the natural world is where I get all my inspiration. I'm not saying I'll never do it, but I don't tend to feel inspired by man-made objects. And that's not to say I don't like pieces of work that have got man-made objects in them. I do love a teapot, or, an armchair design, or I've seen people on Instagram who do embroideries of biscuits and cakes and things like that. Some of them do photorealistic, like famous biscuits in Britain, like jammy dodgers and custard creams and that kind of thing. But it's never something that I'm inspired to stitch. And I think you have to be authentic, don't you? You have to stitch what floats your boat. And nature is what floats my boat, the natural world. It's just so much beauty. So it's where I get a lot of my colour schemes, and it's where I get a lot of my sort of subject matter for stitched pieces. And I hope that if you've been around for a while, or you've discovered this channel and are liking what you see, that that is something that inspires you as well. And when I talk about the natural world, I really mean all of it. So I also find science really inspiring as well. And you wouldn't necessarily think that that goes together, but it's all science, isn't it? So if I'm stitching plants, there's an element of biology there. So we're going into the world of physics, I suppose, with this piece, which I don't often venture into physics, but Rick, my husband, is a physicist. That's his specialism, and he teaches physics. He teaches all science, but his specialism is physics. So I have learnt to be fascinated by the way the world works. I suppose physics is about how things work, isn't it? And that blows my mind. So I love the fact that every now and again, because of the way solar system works, you get this lineup of planets. So it's just really caught my imagination this month when I heard about it. I saw a TikTok about it and thought it was a hoax, but it is a real thing. I have double checked. So you can check it out, Google it, see if you can catch any pictures online of the planet parade. And it probably won't look that impressive, certainly not to the naked eye. It'll just look like stars in a row. But there's something just magical about the fact that there's a whole sort of universe of activity that is happening all the time, regardless of what we're doing. So we have our elections and we have all our things going on in life, and the planets just keep moving. Gives me a lot of hope that nothing really lasts forever. And I think one of the ways of grounding yourself is to remind yourself occasionally of how tiny we are in the grand scheme of things. So I can now hop onto my second piece. I'm not going to make you watch all of this, but we could just chat for a couple of minutes first. And just wanted to get onto the second piece. So yeah, it's big planetary events remind us of our real place in things and how vastly important we are. We have a lot of power as human beings as a species, but we're also kind of utterly irrelevant as well. And I find that a really healthy thing to remember every now and again. So I'm also thinking about the fact that we're getting to that time of year, if it will ever stop raining in the UK. Getting to that time of year where I like to sit in the garden until quite late at night after it's got dark, and near where I live, as a cost cutting initiative from the local authority, the council, all our street lights turn off at midnight. We're out in the middle of nowhere, and it's not like we're in a city centre or anything like that. So it cuts all the light pollution, and it means that we get brilliant night skies, really, really amazing night skies. So it just is fabulous. And if you look carefully, every now and again, you see satellites zipping across the sky, and they're quite easy to spot because they move really quickly. They're as bright as stars, but they move really fast. So when you see a spot of light that's moving without a tail, one that doesn't fade away quickly, so shooting stars are quite instantaneous, but satellites will track across the sky for a good long while, and it's like a moving star. And it's one of my favourite things to do, is sit out with a glass of wine or a cup of tea or whatever I fancy, and just sit in companionable silence with somebody that I care about and look out for satellites. So if you're at a loose end, can I recommend it? It's a great thing to do if you go camping as well, anywhere where there's not a lot of light pollution. Never fails to be thrilling. I thought it wouldn't hurt to do a piece that focuses on what's above us as well as what's around us. And it seemed like a fairly momentous event, a planet parade. So I thought, let's capture that. Right, I'm going to carry on tacking, and I'll come back when I've got all the way around each of the pieces. So I'll see you in a minute. Right, so I've got everything stitched down, and just to build our background, I thought we would do just a little bit of textural slow stitching, and I want to pick up on the idea of the planets moving, and most planets in our solar system have an elliptical orbit. That means they're kind of oval. Now, I do have an oval template, so this has various ovals, but the biggest one is still quite small, so it's only going to give me an oval that size, and actually I want some bigger ones, and so I thought, just get rid of that, I would show you how to make an oval. Now, I have tried this out on paper. How easy it's going to be on fabric, I don't know. But you're going to need a length of thread and a couple of pins. So I'm going to put a pin in. Let's do one over here, and let's have it on a jaunty angle like that. So I've put 2 pins in to my fabric, and what I want to do is just make a loop of thread. It's going to make quite a big oval. It might even go off the edge of the panel. So you don't want it tight around the pins, but you don't want it really loose, because if you have it too loose, it's going to end up being more like a circle. So that'll do, I think. That'll do. Right, so I've got my loop. I've just tied and knot in the end. I've tried several knots trying to get the right size, and I'm just going to pop that around my 2 pins. Maybe I'll make it a little bit bigger. There we go. So those pins are holding that thread like that, and what I want to do is pull it out like that and pop a pen. This is a heat erase pen, but you could use a chalk marker or a water erase pen, and we want to keep tension on our string all the time, and I'm just going to draw. So as it goes over the darker blue, I need to just work backwards and forwards a little bit. Just be careful with your edges, like that. And I'm going to go off the top, that's not a problem, back on to my yellow fabric. Has caught my pen. There we go, and that will take me back pretty much to the beginning, and that has given me an oval on my piece of fabric. I'm just going to cut that loop off because that is going to cause me problems, I think. Now you can vary the size of your oval by varying how far apart the pins are. So I'm going to go a little bit narrower, and I'm going to tie off a little bit more of my thread like that. Just move my pins to another location, and now I'm going to repeat that process. I just want to give myself a bit of a guide. Pen pops out, it's no problem as long as you're keeping tension on your thread. So now I've got another oval there. Let's have a similar one and here. So I'm just going to give myself some lines to stitch over. Like that. So now I've got some ovals, so it's just 2 pins and a loop. You can do it with a rubber band, but it's really difficult to keep the same tension consistently on the rubber band because it obviously will want to stretch. So there we go, that's made some ovals, and that's a bit of a nod to the orbit of planets that we're going to stitch on. So now I've got some pearl cotton, this is like a silver grey, and I'm just going to running stitch around these ovals. So if it just goes off a little way, I'm just going to stitch it. This one that's gone off quite a long way, I'll just stitch up to the outside edge of the shape. So I'm just going to running stitch my way around each of those ovals just to create a bit of texture. And if you want to do more than one ring of stitches, that would be fine. You could use a bright colour, but we're going to put something over the top of this. So once you've got going, you can start loading up your needle with a couple of stitches before you pull through. And if you want to, you could do this in a bit of a spiral. So if you go around once and then move, as you get back to your starting point, just move in a little bit and go around again. And I think that's what I'm going to do. So I'll show you on one of the ellipses, and then I'll go away, stitch the rest, and then come back and show you our finished background. So this is just building our background this week, creating a bit of texture that we're going to overlay some applique shapes onto. Super simple this week, just tacking and running stitch, but we've done that fun technique with our background fabric to make a kind of jigsaw, and then we're kind of doing some sashiko or borrow inspired stitching just to get some texture into our background. We've chosen fabrics that reflect that summer solstice proportion of the day that is going to be daylight and the portion of the day that is going to be night time. And like I said earlier, if you just wanted to keep it really simple and have a block of one colour and then a block of the other colour, that would be fine too. But I quite like the fact that they are intermingled. You could do a blend as well. I did think about cutting lots of 2cm squares and making a bit of a fade, but I thought we'd be stitching forever. So I'm back to the beginning now. So I'm just going to come in a little bit from that line that I drew and go around again. Maybe just over ½ centimetre in. You can go around as many times as you like. You could stitch right into the middle if you wanted to, but I don't want to. I want to give myself some options for later, so I don't want to overstitch at this point. So I want to have the freedom to do something different later on. So just moving backwards and forwards. If I didn't have the batting, I'd be able to get much more fabric onto my needle, so I'll be able to do more stitches in one go. I'm pretty much doing 2 stitches at a time, but the batting means that there's quite a lot of bulk that takes up space. I could probably do more, but don't have enough hand strength really to pull through more fabric than that. So I would recommend not just stopping dead when you get to the beginning, but maybe going on a little bit further, just so you've got a little bit of overlap. Like that. So we've got our stitched, let me bring it up to the camera a little bit. It will be difficult to see at the minute because obviously my blue lines are in, but that's my stitch spiral. I've just taken it through to the back, and any loose threads like that you can either just snip off or tuck away underneath one of the pieces of fabric. So I've got my little stitched ellipsis there that's going to be reminiscent of the orbit of the planets. So you can go to town with that if you want to, or you can keep it fairly simple like I have. I'm going to stitch in the rest and then we'll come back and have a look at our background at this stage. Okay, so here's our background and I'm really pleased with the way that's looking. It's quite subtle. Just going to trim off any loose threads that are getting on my nerves. Quite subtle at this stage, but we're all ready now to build onto it. So if I bring it up to the camera, Hopefully you can see those lines of stitching that are overlapping each other, and it's just given just a little bit of texture and a little bit of interest to that background, and it's also helped quilt together all our layers. So we're going to leave it there for this week. Next week we're going to start adding some surface decoration to this, so we're going to be appliquing on something approximating planets. So do pop back next week and see what we get up to. If you've enjoyed this, I will put another video up here, and I will link the playlist to this whole series of Winging It videos for 2024 down here. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great week making your background, and I will see you very soon. Bye.